You are listening to The Art of Sales. Everyone sells every day, and this is your source for conversational, real-world sales and prospecting methods that you are comfortable using and that get results. You'll help people buy instead of pushing them into being sold. Here's your host, Art Subcheck.
All right, welcome everybody. Today is a very special Art of Sales show because we're having our very first guest ever. That's right. And he's going to talk to us about something that salespeople can do that is, get this, guaranteed to get opened by our prospects and customers, get their attention, and make them feel good about us. And it's about the lowest tech thing that you could possibly do. And maybe you do it now to some degree, and you can do it with pretty much all of your relationships on or off the job, and even if you're not formally in a sales job. So maybe I got your attention there. All right, so our first guest, and actually there was no one else I even considered for this. And I've known and respected this guy since my early days in business, and I'll tell you more about that in a second. First, let me give you his formal introduction. So for over 25 years, Jim Domanski has been owner and president of Teleconcepts Consulting, and that's a firm that helps businesses use the phone more effectively and profitably to generate leads and sell more products and services. And he's got clients in Europe, Canada, the U.S., and Jim provides telephone sales consulting, training, and coaching. He's well known for his very common sense, no-nonsense approach to telephone selling. He's the author of 4 books on telephone sales and prospecting skills and telesales management and coaching. And I've known Jim for over 25 years, and for at least the last 20, he's written a monthly column in my Smart Calling Report training newsletter. And for my money, there's really no one who provides the quality and quantity of solid telephone prospecting and sales how-tos. Nobody that does that better than Jim. And he does it in an entertaining, witty way, as you're about to find out. And he's Canadian, and the Canadians, of course, are some of the nicest people in the world. So, Jim, welcome.
Oh, good day, eh? Hey, don't start there. Stop there. Continue saying more good things about me.
Well, let me see here. What else did you write? No, seriously. Jim, we go back to, actually, tell the audience a little bit about your background, because I think I knew you when you were at Bell Canada. Was that right?
Yeah, that's when we met. Actually, when you were talking, it brings me back to 1985. I had written some article for a magazine you and I used to read a long time ago, and we got in touch. And I think shortly afterwards, that's what started my whole writing career. I started writing the column for you, liked what you were doing, and eventually emulated it to some degree with variations. About 3 or 4 years later, went off on my own from the phone company.
Oh, so you actually owe all of your success to me then, right?
Yes. You haven't been getting the royalty checks?
Oh, no. I must have missed that one. So give us a little bit of history of your background. So you worked at Bell Canada, which for Americans, that's the phone company in Canada. Is it still Bell Canada, or did they break up like ours did here?
Yeah, there's still a Bell Canada, but they're broken up into mini Bell companies like they have in the States. When I was there, I was working for a division called Phone Power. Back in the 80s, long distance telesales and incoming and outgoing was a big trend. And when the companies broke up and new companies came in to give a network presence, prices came down and hit a wave. Shortly after that, I took the opportunity to write a book on telesales in Canada, went across looking at what companies were doing because it was a burgeoning industry, call centers and so forth. That eventually led to me creating my own company in about 1991 or 92. I specialize in the consulting side of things, getting programs set up, working on strategy. But what I discovered that there wasn't a lot of tactical implementation. So that got me into training, and then eventually that got me into the coaching. started in Canada, but most of my work migrated to the States and a little bit to Europe. And now I focus exclusively on outbound business-to-business telesales. So that's it in a nutshell.
All right, great. So what type of companies do you work with? So you mentioned business to business in any specific industries?
Yeah, I do a lot of work for medical companies, pharmaceuticals, wholesalers, retails, electronics companies, anyone that has a business to business presence that's long distance. It works ideally for them.
So you and I both know things have changed, but yet some things have remained the same over the past 30 plus years. What are some of the biggest changes that you see from back then to today as it relates to prospecting and sales using the phone?
Well, that's a good question. Today, the market is saturated with a lot of people using the telephone and using it poorly. But of course, what we've really seen is the advent of the internet, email, text, social media, all of those things that are seeking to perhaps replace or supplement the teleprospecting side of things. So if I were to summarize, I guess I would say that there's a lot of noise in the market. A lot of messages vying for our prospects and our clients' attention. And it's being distinctive. I think that's the challenge today. And to make the phone more effective, you need something to support it. Yeah,
but you mentioned the internet changing things. I think that internet thing is going to catch on.
Yeah. There's a thing called email. I think it's really cool.
So, and I talked quite a bit about this, and we did an entire episode on it. What's your thoughts on the cold calling is dead crowd?
Well, I think it's ridiculous to think that cold calling is dead. If you're going to pin your hopes on people searching the internet and looking for you and your product specifically, good luck. That's an entirely different strategy. Wait and see and hope and pray amidst the noise. If you want to get more selective and targeted, I certainly would be integrating those things. But if you don't have a telephone presence, I think you're losing a major strategic advantage. Period. End of sentence.
Yes, exactly, as we had discussed. And for those of you listening, you can go back to that cold calling, but I forget what I called it. I guess I should research that. But anyway, it's the episode about cold calling. The cold is dead, but not the calling, I believe is what we called it. So there have been a lot of changes over the past 15 years that have actually both helped and hindered the success of salespeople. And technology being a big one. A lot of people hide behind technology and they think that it's going to replace actually speaking with humans, and that's not the case at all. And at the very beginning here, I teased you all about what we're going to be discussing today, and it's very low tech, and it is guaranteed to make an impact, and it's something that people have been doing forever. So, Jim, why don't you introduce your topic today? And first, let me just tell the audience that this was actually an article that was in our Smart Calling Report newsletter that I mentioned Jim writes for. And as I was going through it, like I do with most of Jim's stuff, I'm just looking at it going, oh my gosh, he took this and did a deep dive on it and wrote about things that a lot of people don't even think about that can make this so effective when you implement it. So, Jim, what are we going to be talking about today?
Well, let's kind of call this a hashtag Throwback Thursday topic. What we're talking about is a low-tech strategy or tactic, if you like, in a high-tech world, and that is the art of sending a note, a handwritten note to clients through a thing called direct mail. Very different. The other day, I don't know, I was downtown and I saw a red 68 cherry-colored Camaro go by, and it was in great shape. You look at it, and you see everyone else on the street looking at it. And that's because it's an old car that no one has seen, and it got everyone's attention. And to me, a note as part of your calling strategy and stay in touch strategy is a critical element that creates a personal touch, an old-fashioned way to stay in touch with clients or to initiate a relationship. I guess that's kind of belabored, but I think that's it in a nutshell.
You're talking about something physical that we actually put a stamp on, and we take it to this thing called the physical mailbox?
Ooh, scary, isn't it? Yeah. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I've been talking about this for a long time. I mean, it had impact 30 years ago, and a great analogy with the Camaro, because it is so rare today that people actually take the time to do this. I know when I get my mail, and I get my mail out at the street, and I walk in through the garage, and I have my trash bin there, and that's where I sort my mail. Normally, the bulk mail will go into the trash, but the first class mail will go into another pile that I'll save, and then if there's anything that's actually handwritten, that gets opened right there in the garage. So it's, it definitely has an impact. So tell us a little bit more about the strategy behind this, and I know you have a bunch of tips for us as well.
Yeah, well, I think you nailed it on the head, Art. The biggest thing about a note is that it gets opened right away. Unlike an email or a text that gets deferred or forgotten, if you got a handwritten envelope with a stamp on it, everyone opens it. They wonder what the heck it is. Now, when I talk about notes, I'm not just talking about a card. I guess it's a variety of things. So let's take a look at what I mean by that. It could be a handwritten letter. That's kind of long and tedious, but certainly it's one way to stay in touch. Certainly, thank you cards are a key element to this strategy. Holiday gift greeting cards, Post-it notes attached to a clipping, for example, scribbled notes in a column of an article that maybe you curated. It's anything that creates a sense of personality, but in effect shows that individual that you took the time and made the effort to do something for them. That creates brand recognition, if you want to call it that. It begins to brand you as someone distinctive. I think it gives you a competitive advantage. You're seen, you're heard or read, and you are more likely to be remembered. And if you tied that up with a good follow-up phone call that happens to occur, within a day or so, et voila. To use some French, knowing that you've been in France lately, Art.
Yeah, I was. And, the funny thing about France, to digress here, is I was in Italy, and I could understand the Italians when they spoke English, but I really couldn't understand the French when they tried to speak English, but it just sounded so good.
Yes, it doesn't matter what they say. It's kind of sexy. Stay home.
So getting back to the notes here. So tell us, in what situations you recommend salespeople use notes? For example, prospecting, existing customers, after a sale.
Yeah, well, you've nailed it there. I mean, you can use these for clients. You can use them for prospects. Specifically, there are 6 or 7 ways that I implement myself and recommend to clients. Take a thank you card, for example. Old-fashioned thank you card. Go out and buy some nice stationery, get yourself a decent pen, and you pen a little note after a sale. I mean, that's a logical way. Hey, thank you for the sale. I don't take you for granted, that type of thing. You can send one after a proposal. Hey, Art, thank you for giving me the opportunity to quote. Perhaps it's after a sales meeting, if you're meeting face-to-face or a teleconference. Just drop a little note in the mail. It'll get there in 3 or 4 days. I assure you that for the next 3 or 4 minutes, you are remembered in their minds. In fact, Art, you can even send a thank you note or a little letter after you lose a sale or use a bid. I've got a bit of a template that I use called Things Change, where you send person a note saying, hey, thanks for the opportunity. I also want you to know that things change, and if things should change competitively or with your product or with pricing, I'd like you to know that I'm here and available. That's a classy act to implement with prospects or with an existing client. A second way to use notes is a SIT program, Stay in Touch program. So this is where you use postcards. This keeps you front and center with the client. So, for example, I have a rep in Florida who every winter season gets a pile of postcards, and it's the postcard on the front cover is divided in two. On the one side, there's this beautiful scene of a palm tree along an ocean shore, sun shining, birds in the air. On the other side is a person, looks like they're in Chicago, going through a winter storm. On the sunny side, it says me. On the winter side, it says you. And she sends these to her northern clients as kind of a humorous way to stay in touch. He gets a chuckle every time. I've got another rep who is actually Cuban. She came over in the boat people in the whenever that was, 81 or 82. She went out and discovered a bunch of these old vintage Chiquita banana postcards. Women with a fruit in their hats, and that has become her brand. And she sends these things out whenever she finds them. Everyone gets a chuckle. People have sent her pictures of those postcards hanging up. So there's a clever way and an inexpensive way just to stay in touch without being obvious, without promoting, because it breeds familiarity. And we all know the expression, I know it's overused, but people buy from people they like or people who are like them. So there's a couple of ways. I've got more if you like.
Yeah, go ahead. Those are great. And actually, I'm thinking about this. And if this is new to someone, or if somebody is sitting out there with their arms crossed, objecting to it, what would you say to somebody who says, "Yeah, but this costs money and it takes time"?
Oh, well, that's an investment. This is called return on investment. Look, if your card gets their attention, if you follow it up right away, things happen. So, for example, let's talk about those benefits. Well, when you do follow up on a card, whatever it may be, your prospect or your client tends to take your call. They do that because they feel the need to reciprocate. I know you're a big fan of Robert Cialdini and reciprocity. Just out of courtesy to say thank you for that good idea or that clipping that you sent me. Secondly, when they do take that call, you have meaningful dialogue. They feel compelled to be candid with you, to, at least for a few moments, engage with you. It increases loyalty, I think. I don't think many competitors are doing that. And if you're out there doing little things, Chiquita postcards, recipes, or whatever they may be, it breeds a sense of familiarity, and then you feel compelled to stay a little bit loyal to them, or at least give you a shot if you're in a competitive situation with a client. Things like these also lead to referrals, testimonials, references if you need them. So there's a lot of benefits to doing that. Now, is that worth $1 or $2 per client or prospect? Well, you tell me.
Oh, I'm totally sold on it. And as going back to something you mentioned earlier about the number of messages that people get every day, it helps us really to differentiate ourselves and cut through the clutter. And I love the branding thing. I hadn't really thought about that. And actually, as we were talking, I was reminded of, are you familiar with Joe Girard, the car salesman?
Sure, yeah.
So Joe's trademark was sending out cards, and he sent out, get this, 13,000 cards every month. Every month. And basically what they said was at the on the front, it said, "I like you," and then you'd open it up and then it would have a theme for that month. So this month would be Happy Holidays or Thanksgiving in November and so on.
Yeah.
And again, the people who are thinking, "Oh, well, this costs money," he sold 13,000 cars in a 15-year time frame, and I think he holds the single record for a number of cars, like 1,400, something like that. And basically, he attributes most of it to this strategy. So, I mean, the logistics of sending out 13,000 might be a little much, but the same concept applies here. Now, going back to something you mentioned earlier, you said investing in a nice pen, having, nice stationery. What do you think about these services that automate the sending of cards for you?
I'm not fond of them. The reason is because there's a lot out there. While the handwriting looks personal, eventually you begin to see that it is a little bit industrialized. Now, if you have a base of 1,000, 2,000 clients, perhaps that's what you do. I'm not recommending that you send out cards to 1,000 clients, but if you're like most reps, you can divide your accounts into A, B, C's, and D's, and then apply it accordingly. My top clients get a lot of attention. They're the ones that are going to pay for it. One sale would pay for 10 years worth of cards in my world, as I'm sure they would do in yours. So I have to be practical about it. I'm just a one-man show. So I'm not a big fan of it, but I would take that over just sending out emails en masse and hoping that works.
Yeah, I agree. I think it depends on what your objective is. I think though there's a place for those, and it's somewhere between not sending anything or sending just an email and the personalized handwritten stamp on it. I wrote this just for you.
Yeah.
So let's get in. Let's roll up our sleeves here. Get into the nitty gritty. I know you've got some real specific tips on how to do this. So let's get into those.
Okay, so if you're going to craft a note, first of all, as you mentioned, it's got to be handwritten. You cannot type something up and hope that it's going to have the same effect. The handwriting reveals a bit of your personality. And this comes with some drawbacks. It sometimes means you're going to have to slow down, write neatly, because mine becomes scribbles. But that's a key component to it. You also mentioned an interesting thing at the beginning, Art, which is so critical, is it gets so easy just to put these into the letters or cards or whatever you're doing into an envelope and then put them into the mail room and they get sent out through a postage meter. No, you got to do it by hand. Go out and get some Elvis stamps or whatever the latest thing is. Put them on there because people will look at that right off the bat, see the handwritten thing, and open it. So it's critical that you do that. Go ahead. Yeah.
So absolutely no labels should go on an envelope.
God, no! How horrible! Yeah.
I know. I got one the other day from somebody, and I think they tried to make it look like it was personalized on the inside, but of course it was printed handwriting, but then a label on the front. It did have a stamp, so I didn't know what to make of it.
Schizophrenic.
Yeah. And by the way, I have to print because my handwriting is so bad. I think it's a character disorder or flaw or something. I don't know.
Well, speaking of getting stuff, so just yesterday, I thought it would be perfect for this. I got a card from a vendor, a season's greeting cards, and you open it up, and I've done work with this person. I know them, and I hate this. There's the card with a generic message, and there's like 25 people who've signed it from the company. I only know one person, but I've got all of these names, and I find that, man, that's so industrialized. They just pass it on and someone puts it in an envelope. That, to me, takes away from the whole concept. In fact, it works negatively. So just put that as an aside. I think getting a decent pen, like a rollerball pen that flows, looks good. Some people have, they get an old Bic pen and it looks scratchy and it just quite frankly, it looks cheap. You want to make yourself distinctive. Again, we're talking a little bit about branding, and what you use and what you send is a reflection of you. At the same time, that also implies you got to check your grammar and your spelling. It's a challenge for me as a Canadian writing to American clients because we have different spellings. Humor, for example, is O-U-R up here, and it's O-R down there. So it looks a little bit odd, and I get these comments from it. But it's a great way to chat about how the culture is different, at least in language. But otherwise, if there are errors, it looks bad as well because it implies at some conscious or subconscious level that you are not as competent as you could be. It's unfair, but there's a drawback to it, so be careful.
So you mean we shouldn't be writing UR for your, or K for okay, or LOL?
Like, totally, dude, no. That's going way back. No, and those are the things that have happened, especially younger generation. I don't want to take a shot at millennials. Yes, I do. But there is this way of writing briefly, this is the way my kids do it, my two boys, and it has made its way into the written form as well. Then you've taken the low-tech way and it kind of put a digital spin to it. No character. So.
Right. By the same token, we want to be conversational, but yet make sure that we are using good grammar and check the spelling as well.
Yeah, look, I don't mean to be really, that serious about it. You've got a good relationship with a client. You can speak informally. I'm giving you rules of thumb here. If I were sending you something, I could get away with a lot of this stuff. And same with any good client, because it sends a personality. So you've got to use your common sense on this. But these are rules just to keep you safe. Now, here's another thing.
Yeah, I can't tell the audience some of the things you sent me. So anyway.
Yeah. Fair enough, censored. Also, I don't
surprised it made it through customs, by the way.
Exactly. If you're going to send cards, if we do that, but wait, you know what I should mention, Art, that there's more than just cards. A note is also things like clippings. I love this the best. You become a curator of information that appeal to someone's business or to their hobby. So, for example, I know you like recipes. You're a good cook, so am I. I have a client in Texas, and he's of Italian descent, and he's got his mother's homemade tomato sauce recipe that came from Italy. It's a stained old thing that's been folded up, and written and partially in Italian. It looks horrible, but he made copies of it, and he sends this to his clients, along with some bay leaves that are actually picked from a bay leaf tree. Didn't even know those things existed, with a little Post-it note on it. I mean, how cool is that? You get this thing that's got a history, a story behind it. Now this guy becomes interesting, and anytime he's on the phone, and I've listened to his monitored calls, it's amazing. Same thing with this.
I want one. What is it for? Sunday gravy?
Yeah, Sunday gravy. Yeah.
Oh, man, I want to. By the way, I'm better than a good cook. I am a professional.
I stand corrected. Yeah.
Yes,
humble before you.
I'm actually doing a barbecue competition next week again. I've been retired for a couple of years, but coming out of retirement. So,
well, anyone who knows you knows about your barbecue stuff. So, man, if they were working with you, I'd be sending you spices or a recipe for a spice with a little Post-it note that said, "Hey, Art, thought of you when I saw this article from Condeste magazine. Thought you might like it." Now, that's going to be seen and remembered.
Yeah, if anybody listening, feel free to do that. Actually, I prefer just the cash.
Cash, yeah. Forget the card, send cash. Yeah. Toss the gun, keep the cannoli. Yeah.
I'm not sure I got that reference, but anyway.
It's Godfather.
Oh, okay. All right. I prefer Goodfellas, actually.
That's a good one. Yeah. Here's another thing I don't like is that if you're using cards, do not use it with your logo, company logo splashed all over it. I get these on seasonal things, and there's a great big company logo on it, and then a thank you or whatever the note is. And I realize that it's branding the company, but what I realize is that it's coming from the company, not necessarily from the rep. To me, that's a takeaway. If you're going to take the time to develop a relationship, make it with you, the individual, and not the company. I mean, you can still put a business card inside if you're still getting to know them. I don't mind that, but if you're going to put a business card in it, flip it over, take a paper clip, and write a little note. Hey, Art, thought you might like this. Art, looking forward to working with you, or whatever. They'll all take the paper clip off. They'll all turn it over, and there you are. There's your business card, but it's got a little bit of a personal element to it. Does that make sense?
Love that. So this is not an advertisement. This is more of a me to you personal note. So I guess I would rule out sending a big company catalog.
Yeah, exactly. But I'll tell you, if you were going to send a big company catalog, imagine this. You go to 4 or 5 pages. You put one of those Post-it arrows in there. You open up, the person opens up the page, and they see that you've circled an item or two saying, hey, Art, this is new. Thought you might like it. You put a Post-it note on front. So if you were sending an old paper, fashion paper catalog, heck, you've now done some work for them. If you open it up, would you not turn to those 3 tabs automatically and see what's there?
Absolutely. And actually, this could be an entire different show, because for our audience out there, Jim came up with this concept, this term called pretty ugly. So whatever you send out, you want to make it pretty ugly.
Yep. Yeah, pretty ugly means highlighting it. So here's another thing I like to do. You see, in fact, I just got, the same guy that sends out the spaghetti recipe or the tomato sauce recipe, he found an article on trends, social media trends for chiropractics. That's chiropractors. That's who he targets. So he could email that, forward as a link. What I'm recommending is print that thing out for your top docs. Curate it by making it pretty ugly. Highlight key parts, circle things, write things in the column, and do the work for them. If they read nothing else, they will read your ugly little scribbles. And for those few moments, you are remembered. When you make your follow-up call, and this is another key point, as I said earlier, you make that follow-up call, anticipate that it's going 1 or 2 days after receipt, and then you can reference it. But you can't clobber them over the head with it. Hey, Art, did you get my recipe? Like a little panting dog. Give me praise, pat me. No, you do something like, hey, Art, it's Jim Domanski calling from Teleconcept. A couple reasons for my call. First, hope you cut that recipe on the spaghetti sauce. I know you're going to like it. And secondly, and you go on to your business reason. Inevitably, Art, they stop you before you get to the second point to talk about that recipe or that article that you sent, and you've established it. If they don't want to talk about it, you've moved on to business stuff, and you don't look like that eager little dog waiting to say, praise me. That makes sense too?
It does. And actually, I think we just started a routine here with every guest I have on in the future. I'm going to have them do the panting dog sound.
Yeah. Please pat me. Well, to me, it's the art. We're using art a lot. I like this, the art of the sales. It's the art of the subtle. If you make it too obvious, then you're doing it for yourself and not for them. But on the other hand, we have to remember this is part of leveraging. But most of the time, the majority of the time, people will remember that good gesture. I also want to say here, Art, of course, that you don't pin your whole strategy on sending cards. You can still send emails. You can still use text, dimensional mailers, sending spices or whatever, interspersing it with a phone call. These are all part of a bigger thing. But the notes part to me is distinctive because very few people do it. Everyone else will do the rest more or less in different fashion. So. Yeah,
I agree. We've got a lot of tools available to us, and it's kind of like there are some people that say, don't call, you got to only do social media. I mean, I don't think there's any one thing that you can only do and have success with. We have to do all these things, and some use them more than others to some degree. And I like what you said about dimensional mailing. For people aren't familiar with that term, some people call it lumpy mail. I believe that's a Dan Kennedy term, but it's sending something physical in an envelope that's going to attract attention and get opened. And it's, again, along the same lines. And of course, if you attach a note to it using this strategy, it's going to have more impact. My feeling on those things, because I always get questions like, what should I send in advance of a prospecting call? And my suggestion is, hey, you do it. You can be creative with it. And you hear all the stories about somebody would send a big blow up foot saying, I'm trying to get my foot in the door. Yeah. I compare those things to trick plays in football. Yeah. They'll work every once in a while. You might want to have them in your arsenal, but you don't want to base your whole game plan on it. You can pull it out every once in a while.
Yeah, and those are clever and witty, and then sometimes they just get a little bit absurd, to be quite frank. This is why I've said it many times. I love doing the spices, and you do a silly thing that says, "Hey, Art, here's some homemade spices. Hope this spice things up," or wanted to lend some spice to the season, or something silly like that, and you put the words "ha ha" on it. I like it because it is not only dimensional in kinetic, you can feel it, but it's got the sensuality of smell and taste. Everyone opens up Jimbo Spices right away and tastes it. You can't help. And now you've related to them on a personal level, as well as on a sensual level with the taste and smell. So those to me are clever ways of doing it without going overboard.
And I love that too, because it's part of your branding. I mean, you're known as the spice guy, and something else here that is brilliant is that it's a consumable, so that if they like it and they run out, they're going to think about you and want some more. Because I actually make my own seasoned salt.
Yeah.
And the people that use it, they'll kind of sheepishly get in contact with me and say, hey, if you're doing another batch, I could use some. And they feel badly about it. And I look at it as that's like the ultimate compliment.
There's a fellow in Memphis that I haven't done work with in 10 years, and he calls me every year, and he wants the spices, which I gladly send to him. He also likes Red River cereal. It's something that has been the most sustainable thing. I probably send out, 2-3 dozen in any given year, and those are just either repeat customers or old-time customers. And it's fun to stay in touch. They become your friends. They're referral sources. They're references, as I said.
Yeah, I'm just thinking here, I'm trying to visualize the cards. Now, I have, in addition to my company stationery, I had stationery made up, just little, 3x5 cards just with my name on it. That's it. So what do you recommend that people use for this?
Well, I've got a few reps that do this strategy, and I kind of stole it from the real estate area. And it's a semi-postcard or greeting card, but on it is a picture of the rep. Because when you send a picture of yourself in our world of telesales, we add another dimension that we don't have, and that's the face-to-face selling. But suddenly we've created an appearance. On that, you could have a quote, you could have a little bio, but there's always, or even a little WWD, what we do phrase about your company. We work with companies to make them more effective using the phone and email, something like that. But that card is so versatile because you leave a spot where you could write a thank you note, a follow-up note. It's something that combines that written word with the visual side of the element. Those things are hard to throw away, Art, because there's something, slightly terrible about sending someone's picture, throwing someone's picture into a garbage can. So that's been really effective, and it becomes a great conversation piece for people. So that's an excellent tool for prospecting, and it's also an excellent tool with existing clients. So when we send out a product, we can throw that card in there. And then there's that visual reminder, here's the person I'm dealing with. It's also harder to terminate a good relationship with them when they now see you. There's something advantageous when they've never really met you, in the telephone world. But now, when you see those eyes staring at you, So there's my big tip for that. But you cannot get too over-promotional with any of your cards or notes, as I said before. It's got to be very subtle, the art of subtlety.
I never thought about that whole not wanting to throw away somebody's picture. I'm thinking about taking that to an extreme. I'm thinking maybe of having bobblehead dolls made of myself and sending those to people.
Yeah. Oh, that's a real winner, eh?
All right. What other tips do you have here for us before we wrap up?
Well, as I said, the key thing I think is to proofread. Beware of humor. Unless the client really knows you, got to be very careful about what you write because you miss the tonality of things. One of the advantages in the world of text, for example, is you can put the emoticons. You can still do a smiley face and so forth, and that's not a bad idea to put those little things in there. But humor is something that, unless, again, you know the client very well, avoid it at all costs.
Would that be the Canadian humor with the OR or the American OR?
Oh, aren't you funny?
Oh, you are.
Yeah, funny.
I'm here all week.
Yeah. Avoid jargon. That's another thing. If you're referring to something in business, a Form 1029 or a 1099 or whatever, a lot of people don't get that. We sometimes go into the jargon, or we use some of the what we see on internet, like BTW, by the way. But there are things that are out there that my kids use that I don't know what those initials stand for. So you want the message to be clear and concise. And that's the other thing. Like a text, your message should usually be no more than, 50, 75 words. It cannot be a long the labored story. You want it to make it fast and an easy read. It creates a good impression without flogging yourself with a lot of detail.
So to be clear here, this really isn't intended to have a call to action as much as to just leave an impression.
Well, yes, you're right. It's to leave an impression, but you could have a call to action. So if I were to combine it with the spices, which is the way I've used it, I've sent these things out to prospects with the Post-it note on it. Hey, Art, just wanted to spice things up. Give me a call. Or I let them know I'll be calling them. The trouble with the call to action is they don't always do it, and I'm going to follow up anyways. To me, if you're going to take the time to send these to individuals, you may as well make the follow-up call yourself. So I want to be proactive rather than make it a reactive strategy.
So let's get into that, because this is a key component, and I know a lot of people could fall down right here. And what we don't want to do is call up and say, hey, Jimbo, our subject here, I'm the guy that sent you the spices.
Yeah, look at me, panting dog.
Exactly. So give us your strategy for the follow-up call.
Okay, so I referenced it a little bit, but I use my favorite opening, the humble approach. It's the I don't know or I'm not certain if trigger phrase. So, hey, Art, it's Jim Domanski calling from Teleconcepts Consulting. Hey, Art, the reason for my call is to follow up on a little item that I sent you on the I don't know, spaghetti sauce. Not certain if you had an opportunity to review it, or to take a look at it, or to try it, or whatever you want to say. But I thought you might enjoy it this holiday season. Art, the other reason why I'm calling is, okay, so again, I go back and I reference the item and I use the humble approach. I'm not certain if you tried it, or I don't know if you got it, because it allows them an escape if they didn't get it or if they didn't read it. If they didn't, they'll say, oh, no, I haven't, or oh, yeah, I haven't got around to it, and that's fine too. But if they do hear it, they feel compelled to begin the reciprocity. Oh, yeah, I got it. It's really good. Now, suddenly, you've got a degree of rapport. When you get to that second point, from a prospecting point of view of, hey, I want to learn more about your business or set up a conference or whatever you're trying to do, it gets a lot easier to segue into that, because now you're at a comfort level. In our world of the phone, we don't have the handshake and sitting down across from the desk and looking at the guy in a picture holding a fish, to make the comment. We are the ones that have got to do that. So that's how I would be utilizing it. And again, timing, as in most things, is everything. You want to call when they have got it within a day or two. Anything beyond that, it gets a little dicey that they remember, and they'll start doing things like, oh yeah, I forgot. So you need to have a good follow-up system that says, if I mail this on a Monday, depending on where it's going, it'll be there next Tuesday. I got to stick it in my Act or whatever I'm using as a database, Salesforce, so that I have an alarm to call them on the following Wednesday. So that's where the process comes in.
Yeah, that's brilliant on several levels. And just to reiterate, and it's pretty much the same thing I teach, and that is, go into the call almost assuming that they didn't get it, because that way you're going to be prepared to still go into your reason for the call and your value statement. Yeah. So when they do remember it, that's a bonus, but we're not making it the reason for the call. Again, as in, hi Jim, our subject here. Hey, I sent you the spices the other day. Did you get it? Okay. And now we're just talking about the spices as opposed to getting down to the business reason for the call. And as you mentioned, now you have them in that better frame of mind to get into the business conversation, and they're doing it from more of the mindset of the reciprocity, and they kind of like you already because we've done something for them.
Yep.
Good stuff, my friend. Anything else on this you want to share with the audience?
Well, like anything, you can't expect instant results. This is part of a get well program or a get in shape program. It's something that you need to be doing on a regular basis, and the more you do it, the stronger you are going to get, and the more effective it's going to be becoming. If you're doing it just on a one-off here and there, you're going to get one-off kind of results. This is why if you're building a stay in touch program or a grooming program, it has that component in it along with the other things, and it becomes a regular part of your approach. Once it becomes routine, it runs on its own. It works extremely well. You've got it figured out. Mark, with the sauce thing, has been using that for a year and a half now, and it goes to all of his new clients, and it works like a charm. He doesn't have to think about it. It's become automatic. It makes him more effective and more efficient in his whole process. He knows when to call. He knows what to say when he speaks with them. So that's, I guess, what I'd say is, like anything, you got to consistently do it to get more consistent results from that client or prospect.
Makes sense. Make it a ritual. Don't make it just a shiny object that we're going to try once, and then if you don't get immediate results, like, well, I tried that, it didn't work. So good stuff. Jim, before we end, we're going to get into all your contact information. Before we do that, we have, speaking of a ritual, we have something that we do every single show.
Your attitude will be iron every way, you'll never feel what they say. It's the art of the sales, quote of the day.
That's right. It's the quote of the day. So, Jim, I know that you have a quote that is kind of near and dear to your heart. So would you share that with us and tell us why it's meaningful for you?
Yeah, I've got a quote here from Mark Twain, and it goes like this: "The secret to getting ahead is getting started." I don't know where I stumbled across that, but I found it almost profound. You train as well as I do, Art, and I see eager faces in the crowd. They leave your training with this intent on getting started, and they quickly go back and do what they've always done. They don't get started on the ideas that we give them. They promise to do it in their minds. I know they have good intentions, but it don't get done unless you get started. I think that's the biggest thing in 25 years that I have seen with virtually all reps, especially the new ones. The good ones, don't worry about, but the new ones and somewhere in the middle are struggling. It's you're not getting started. Because once the starting begins, the habit is created. That's why I was talking about the process of doing this. So that's the one that I tend to like in training.
I love it. I love it. And there are so many other quotes that are similar to that as well. What is it? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with what, the first step?
Yep.
Yeah, single step. I heard one the other day, somebody repeated to me, and that was, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The other best time is right now.
Right now. Yeah.
Done or started is better than perfect, because we'll never reach perfection. So all those things, and just like you in my training, at the end of every module, I have reps write out action steps, and that is, what are you going to commit to do as a result of what we talked about here? And I'll challenge the audience here. What are you going to do as a result of everything that Jim talked about here today, and put that quote into action? Just get started. You don't have to make it perfect. You don't have to over-engineer. This is one of the simplest things that you could possibly do. So, Jim, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. How can our audience get in touch with you and share some of the things that you might have that they can access? Right.
Well, so phone number 613-591-1998. So that's our medium. There's how you can give me a call. Email, it's jim@teleconceptsconsulting.com. I know it's a long name, but just Google Jim Domanski, you'll find it. There you go. Now, since we're talking about notes, do I give you my address? Okay, in case you want to send gifts. 35 Vanstone Drive, and the town is Canada, Kanata. Kind of sounds like it's Canadian, eh? Ontario, Canada, K2L1W4. So there's the old low-tech way of reaching me. So that'll do it.
All right. So it is okay if people do send you gifts and notes and things.
And cash.
And cash, too. Is that Canadian fund? You probably would prefer American.
American, yes, because we're trading at about 38 cents, so good.
All right. And I would encourage you all, go to Jim's site. He's got some great content there, absolutely great content. And also in the show notes, we'll have how you can get the Smart Calling Report training newsletter that Jim is in every month, as well as the past 9 years worth of issues. So you'd have like over 100 articles of Jim's there in the newsletter. So Jim, again, thank you so much. And you are our first guest, and I'd like you to become a recurring guest as well, because you have so much material, valuable material to share with us, and you're a fun guy to talk to.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure as always, Art. Season's greetings.
All right. Great. All right, everybody. If you're getting value out of this show, I would request that you help out a couple friends. Send them to the show site, theartofsales.com. Email them. Post this also on whatever social media that you use. If you're on iTunes, please give us a 5-star rating and review. Thank you so much for investing your time with us. Thanks again to Jim. And until next time, go out and make it your best sales day ever. I'm Art Sobczak.